Hi, thanks for tuning in today to Front Porch Conversations here at the Advent Christian Village. Again, today we're at the Harmony Center and enjoying a beautiful day here at the Village. I'd like to introduce you to our guest, Ruth Shields. Ruth, thank you so much for being a part of this conversation today.
Wow, looking forward to it.
Me too. Well, let's get started. Where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born in Tacoma, Washington, but I was raised in Montana on a small ranch. That my dad was a wrangler.
And tell our viewers who may not know what a wrangler is.
Just a cowboy. A cowboy with 7 children, so we were kind of low on the...
Well, just briefly, you were telling me a minute ago about your family coming to the United States. Would you share that with our viewers?
Yes, they came from Russia. They were there for a couple of generations. They had been from Germany, and then they started changing the rules and made all of the Germans start to speak Russian. And my grandparents, the great-grandparents, they never did. So they moved.
And you were telling me about your grandmother, your mother. Where was she born?
She was born in North Dakota.
And did she come across in a covered wagon while?
My grandmother came from in a covered wagon. She was born in a covered wagon on the way to North Dakota.
Well, I bet a lot of people can't say that about their families,
No.
or they didn't know if that was the case. Well, that's wonderful. Well, tell us about growing up in Montana. What was life like with 6 other siblings?
Well, we lived, out in the country, had our little cows to milk, and I was one of the oldest. So my job was to corral the kids, and
so you were kind of a wrangler too.
Yes, and went to school at a small Indian agency, and so that was kind of interesting. We had especially the meals. We had the best meals. We had buffalo and antelope and deer, and we had cooks that knew what to do with all that good stuff.
Did you live at the school, or was it a day school?
It was a day school. I wasn't Indian, but all my friends were.
That's a different kind of upbringing, I'm sure. Tell us a little bit about what you learned from your classmates that were Indians.
Well, I don't know. We didn't, that's all I knew. Didn't seem to think it was any different than any other. It was just, we were all poor. We did a lot of hunting, and of course it was not really legal for me to hunt year-round because I was not Indian. But they could go bow hunting year-round, and I always went. I was the one with the rifle because, if you're bear hunting and something goes wrong, somebody has to have a rifle. Right. And I had a bow, but it was an 80-pound test bow, and I was a skinny little kid. And I could sometimes get it back, and sometimes I couldn't. So
well, that's not too good if something is charging at you, right? And did you ever kill a bear?
Yes, matter of fact, we killed a bear. When I was married. My husband and I went out bear hunting, and I had just had a baby. She was 12 days old, and we went bear hunting. And we drove around, and we were going to eat the meat. We tan the hide, but we eat the meat too. So we were pretty particular what kind of bear we got, and we didn't want a garbage dump bear. So we ended up going to driving around. Finally, we found a spot that looked good. And I was exhausted, and my husband started cooking on the back tailgate of the, he had a little Coleman burner there and was fixing tube steaks. And I'm sitting there with the baby, and I asked him, I said, we're going to spend the night? And he says, yeah. And I said, well, if you shot a bear right now, would we spend the night? And he says, well, no. And I says, well, can we at least eat first? And he says, I'm cooking right now. I said, well, pick up your gun and turn around real slow. So we got our bear.
And you didn't spend the night.
And we didn't spend the night. And we had a picture of the bear sitting up holding my baby daughter.
Oh my gosh. Do you still have a copy of that picture?
No.
That would be wonderful to share. Well, I don't think anybody that I've had a front porch conversation with has told me a story like that, and I'm glad to hear it. Where did you and your husband meet?
Well, I was a waitress. My last husband, I've been married before, but my last husband, I was a waitress, and he came in to where I worked. And one of the girls was talking about him. He wasn't very noticeable. And she says, that guy. And I said, well, what guy? And she says, the one that always asks for your station. Well, now I'm interested. And so I met him there at the restaurant, and he always sat in my station. He was having car trouble, so he was going to get his car fixed. So I told him, well, use mine, because I was working 2 jobs, but so long as, one job I could walk, and the other one, so long as I had the car back. By that time, I didn't, So then he took me out to dinner, and that was it. We went together ever since.
Well, let's back up a minute and talk about you have how many children?
I have 2. My husband had 5.
So you are, again, a family of 7 children, right?
Yeah.
After you married him, where did you live?
Well, we lived all over the world. He worked for Westinghouse. He installed and repaired power plants. And so we would go to like Korea or Argentina or something, and we'd be there for months or sometimes years at a time. And the best thing about it was they don't build the power plants in the cosmopolitan areas. So we really got to see the country as it really is, and that was always.
And were your children, did they go with you, or was this at a later time?
It was later, it was later. It was after the children were through school, then I was free.
Where was the favorite place you had lived overseas?
Argentina was my favorite. Of course, we were there for 3 years. But up until I moved to Argentina, I had to stuff myself to maintain 102. But Argentina changed all that. I love the food.
And describe Argentine food to me. I think I have an idea, but.
Well, it's, if you go into a restaurant, you don't get a menu. They set you down and they start bringing the food. And you're not going to get a menu until dessert. But they usually all bring like a small grill, and it'll have, well, you start out with your appetizers, always appetizers. If you go to a restaurant and there's not 3 hours before closing time, you can't get in. And
it's not a 30-minute experience.
It's not. And they bring you the food, and they just keep it coming. You have your appetizers, then you have your salads, and then they bring you a little grill, and it'll have like chicken and lamb and beef and pork and everything on it. And, and they keep refilling, and, it's, it was amazing. And their breads are fantastic, and it was just all good.
And when you lived in Argentina, did you live in a near a river, or was it jungly?
No, I was actually in the desert.
Oh, okay.
And we lived in kind of a apartment building there, and they were really kind of poor country. They had been communist, and then they had changed, and it was really tough, for families there. I mean, they had to move together quite a bit, and usually they would move in with the wife's parents, The people that were retired that had been working for the government all their lives, and they were thinking they were going to get like $1,500 a month, ended up getting a payout of $15,000
one time,
and you're
payout.
through.
Wow.
So the older people had the homes, and so the younger people moved in and brought the income.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was kind of hard times for most people there at that time.
When did you and your husband move back to the United States to live full time?
Well, we always had a house in the United States, because we just, sometimes we'd rent it out, when we were gone. But he quit work when he was 72. And the last few years he was working just when somebody had screwed something up pretty bad and they weren't talking to Westinghouse, he'd send him and he finished the job. It's funny because he always had a saying, he says, sometimes you don't have time to do it right, but you always have time to do it over,
I've heard that saying, and it's so true. And it reminds me sometimes just slow down and try to get it right the first time.
So he's the one that does it over.
Well, it was a good opportunity for him, I'm sure, though, to be able to, and he had the talent to do it and skills.
Yeah, he was an amazing man. He was raised a sharecropper son and lied about his age to get into the military and got his education in the military and became an airplane mechanic and continued to educate himself. When he came out, he went to Atlanta Tech and taught there aviational engineering. And for a self-taught guy, that was pretty good. He sent one of his, he called up one of the people that he calls when he has exceptional student. Mm-hmm. And he called and he says, I have somebody I want you to look at. And the guy says, I don't want to look at him. I want you to come in. And he says, well, I have a job. And he says, I don't care. I want you to come in. So he went in, and of course they pay a lot more than teachers. Mm-hmm. So he started working for Westinghouse. So he retired after 23 years in the military, and then he put in 20-some years in Westinghouse. So.
When you were living over in other countries, you said you really didn't learn to speak the other languages too much.
No.
But how did you get along?
Well, I usually got along pretty good. Most countries that you go to, there's a lot of people that speak English. Mm-hmm. In Argentina, I tried to learn Spanish, and I can read it. I have a Kindle that I download Spanish books, just to keep that skill. But I could never speak it. My husband, he could speak it. He would, he'd be running a crew, and he could let them know what needed to be done. But he couldn't read it. So when we go to a menu, to a restaurant, I'd look at the menu, I'd tell him what's on it, and he'd figure out how to get it to us.
Where did he grow up and with his family as sharecroppers?
In Texas.
And that's a hard way of life living as well.
Yeah, that was a family of 10 there, and he was, one of the oldest. His mother was Indian, and they lived on a reservation.
They did the sharecropping on the reservation?
Yes. Well, his on leased land.
Oh, okay.
That the owner, the person they worked for, leased the land. But it was.
And I think that's probably a term that's pretty much out of practice anymore.
Yeah, I would hope so.
I would hope so too. You were telling me about a treasure that your brother created for your family. Would you tell us about that?
Yeah, my brother's a playwright, and he wrote a musical. No, my family's not musical, but he wrote a musical, and it tells the story of my family from the time they came over on the boat and their trip to North Dakota, and then being run out of North Dakota because of the drought, and starting over in Tacoma, and they go from generation to generation. Yeah.
That would be a wonderful gift for any family to have, even a written story of that, but have it as a musical.
Yeah. It's the only time I ever saw my mother sing.
But it was the character who could sing, right?
Yeah.
That would be the case in my family. Nobody could sing. We liked to, but nobody liked to hear us.
Yeah.
Ruth, how did you and your husband come to know about the village?
Well, we were teaching a Bible study out at the Present out by Mayo. Mm-hmm. And we would drive by on 90. There's a sign that says Dowling Park. And I said, there's nothing down there. There's nothing down there. And so one day, out of curiosity, we took a ride and we found the village. But then we moved and we kind of forgot about it. And my daughter-in-law was over the Chamber of Commerce for Madison. And she came to the village and did something, for the chamber. And she called me up and she says, Mom, you got to come see this, And at that time I was a caregiver for my husband, and I was needing to get someplace else, so I could have a little help with that. And so that's when we moved.
And when was that?
About 6 years ago.
And originally you moved in, where did you move at the village?
We moved to Lawrence House.
Oh, that's right, okay.
And really liked that. And then my husband, he went downhill really fast, It seems like when you're older, moves aren't too easy. And so he was about 3 years in the nursing home. And I was there 3 times a day, so I didn't really know anyone. I didn't, and every place we went before, he always drove. I didn't even know how to get out of the village, Going to Live Oak, I wouldn't have had a clue.
But you found your way out of the village now, right?
Oh, yes.
And then after he went to the nursing home, you moved on campus, another location to a home?
Yes. Well, I bought one home while he was in the nursing home because, I had to do something different. And so I bought a home thinking I would have him back, but it never happened.
And you live in Riverwoods?
I live in Riverwoods. We have game night at my place on Thursday nights, which because of COVID, it's been closed down, but we've started back up, and that's been kind of nice, get a group of neighborhood people together.
What kind of games do you play?
Well, we play hand and foot, we play rummy cue, we play dominoes, sometimes people will bring their favorite game, or, sometimes we've had up to 4 tables in an evening, So we break into little groups and play whatever anybody wants.
And I understand you're involved in another game that you play.
Yes, on Mondays we play Mahjong. And we're always looking for more people for that.
I played so long ago, but I really enjoyed it, so I'd like to start again sometime.
Well, anytime. We start Mondays at 1 o'clock.
And Mahjong is a game, tell our viewers in case they're not familiar with Mahjong.
Well, the Mahjong that we play is not the original Mahjong. It's the American Mahjong, and it was started by Jewish women in New York, and it's played with the tiles, and you have a card where you have the hands that you pick and play. But it's just a nice get-together.
We played it years ago when our children were very little, and they would go to sleep early with another couple, but that's been quite a long time ago.
It comes back quick. And they change the cards every year, so it's always new.
Oh, okay, because I didn't remember the card part. I couldn't remember, how it worked, but good. Well, that's good to know. You've acquired some other interests since you've moved to the village. Or activities?
Yeah, I like to kayak, and I like to hike.
But kayaking was something new for you, right?
Yeah, I'd never kayaked before, and I like it. Kind of wish I could swim, but
But you do have a life jacket, right?
I do have a life jacket. But I have had a few experiences where I haven't quite kept in the boat, but if you're ever going to fall out, Tuckney is a good place to be. The water's warm.
Okay, I'm not thinking that, but I'll take your word for it. And the current will take you to where you need to go, even if you aren't in the boat, right? It's another advantage. How did you and your husband get involved in prison ministry and Bible study?
Well, actually, my husband was Baptist, and I'm a Mormon. And we used to get up early Sunday mornings, and we would get in our car and take an early morning ride. We'd be all dressed up for church. We'd pick a car, and we'd bet which church we were going to that day. But anyway, my son was raised Mormon, and my son ended up with a alcohol problem, and he went to the Salvation Army and was there for 9 months treatment. And when he came out, he started going to the Church of the Nazarene. And so my husband and I, wanting him to know that whatever church he went to, we were going to back him, we started going to the Church of the Nazarene. And the preacher there, his name was Medeiros, he worked out at the prison. He had a prison ministry there. And he knew that we liked to do Bible study. So he's the one that got us started out there.
And I'm sure that was challenging but rewarding as well.
Oh, it was we loved it. When we moved from Jennings to the last place we lived, Palm Coast, we found a prison before we found a house.
Well, that was knowing what your priorities were going to be, right? And how long did you live in Palm Coast?
We lived there about 6 years, but my husband had his stroke during the move. So I never really got established there. You know, I became a caregiver from the time I got there.
Ruth, if you could give a young person some advice, what would that be?
I don't know. I did everything wrong. It still turned out okay.
That's right. Well, I think some of it probably goes back to your upbringing and, you know, for all of us.
Yeah,
And then
stay
and God's
centered.
grace and God's
Stay
grace.
centered. Yeah, I've always felt like I was one of his favorites, you know, because everything always turns out right. You know, it's just like things don't always go the way you think they should, but God always showed me a way. And so I was always very lucky. And I just, you know, I always just turned it over to God. And he always sees to my needs.
That's wonderful. Is there anything on your bucket list you'd still like to do?
I would like to travel more. And that's been, you know, with COVID, I feel a little cheated. At my age, I'm really healthy and I should be out there going.
Well, maybe before long. I bet a lot of people will be traveling more that have wanted to travel during this time. Ruth, thanks so much for joining us today, and I look forward to getting to know you better and other people in the village getting to know you. Thanks a lot. And please tune in again for another Front Porch Conversation.